busy days, and you?
I'm fine, fine. Yes, easy too. Hi, Roberto. Hi, Monitor. Hi, everybody. Yeah, good to see you all. So, Monitor, you will say when we start.
I think we can start, Ms. Karimi. Please, I will give the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So this is really great to be here this afternoon. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you who join us from, I hope, many different places around the world. And Madam President, dear members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and distinguished guests, we are really very pleased to have all of you here. I think it is really very important topic that we are going to discuss this afternoon. And I am really very glad to have all these different also experts with us to be able to really have a depth discussion about a very important topic for our time, namely youth and peace and security, and youth engagement on very important topics of peace and security. But before actually starting our meeting with conversations, I have a few traditional technical aspects that I would like to mention. The first is, please note that this meeting is being recorded and broadcasted live on the OSCE PS social media platforms. And secondly, I ask kindly all participants to mute their microphones when not speaking. Likewise, please unmute your microphone only when given the floor. And please note that requests to take the floor or ask questions should be written in the webinar's chat. I think these are a few very clear, rules that we have to respect today. So I would like again to welcome all of you to this webinar. And as I mentioned, our topic is a very important topic for our time, when we see in our region, but actually everywhere around the world, conflicts and wars happening, extremism actually taking place in many places. And we see that young people in a world that, in this world are very much affected by these developments. Actually, our world has the hugest number of young people around the world ever. And this is something very good and very, really a huge capital for humankind. But at the same time, we know that there are a lot of actually problems and issues that especially young people face. And when we talk about conflicts, about wars, we know that the young people are affected badly and in very different ways. And one of the ways is also, for example, as refugees and internally displaced people. Most of the people on the move are young people, also children, but especially young people. And when I was preparing myself for this meeting, I couldn't actually, I couldn't stop thinking on this ship that is capsized actually in Mediterranean Sea last night, actually in the night from Tuesday to Wednesday. And the ship was actually, had hundreds of refugees on board, and many actually died. And we don't know the exact number of the people who died, but we know one thing, that this were people actually leaving desperately their home countries with a lot of hopes for the future, and looking for a different actually future than they thought that was waiting for them in their own home countries. Now, we don't want to see this kind of situations. I think this is something that we all together share. We want to have a world in which everybody actually feels safe and secure and feels that have a future for themselves, for their children, for young people. And that is actually what moves us and motivates us as representatives of people. We are a parliamentary assembly. That means we are parliamentarians, representatives of people. And we hope and we work, of course, on the desire, the realization of desire and hope of our communities. And in those communities, of course, the young people are the ones who are most important for our future. And interesting thing is that in 2015, the World Community, International Community, and then I mean of course, Security Council of the United Nations, had a very good vision and a very good thought about how the young people should be really involved and engaged in peace and security matters. So the resolution 2020-50 was adopted in 2015, actually 8 years ago, unanimously by the members of the Security Council. And it says really, it sets a vision which is still very important. And I think this is actually what we as representatives of people have to wonder why we are not really properly paying attention to this vision and why the implementation is not really going forward. But I don't want to start as a pessimist in this meeting, but really as an optimist. So that means that we have this norm, we have this resolution, the resolution 2250 of the Security Council adopted in 2015. This is a vision that we I think should really be very careful about it, and it is a precious norm for our world, and we should all together try to realize and implement that resolution, which has really very important recommendations. It is meant to create an environment in which really the participation of young people in creating lasting peace and security for our world is really key, and that is something that it emphasizes. And it really recommends and demands, if you want, the member states, all the countries that are member of the United Nations to develop mechanisms and strategies to include young people in peace processes and negotiations. And it really wants that the participation of young people at all levels of decision making is increased. So at local level, national level, regional level, and also globally, the young people should be heard. They should be participating in actually decision making processes. One could say these are kind of maybe obvious things. We should understand, and we should do that because that's such that it speaks for itself. But unfortunately, we know that that's not the case. In reality, the voices of young people are not heard, and they are not participating really as decision makers in our decision making processes. So very concrete, the resolution actually demands for an action plan by member states, and that these actually recommendations are translated to activities, to actions, to policies, to really concrete measures. A few countries around the world actually translated that, and I am sure that from our excellent panel members that I will actually introduce them shortly, we will hear where we stand with the implementation of that and which countries are doing well and which are not. We know one country actually in our own region, OSCE, has done a great job, and that's Finland. And we will have, luckily, representative of the government of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland today with us. And in addition, we will have also, I think, colleagues, members of OSCE PA from Finland with us. So where they could actually explain how they have been able to manage that, how it goes, and we are really eager to learn from their experience. So because we as parliamentarians, we have really a role to play in really try to push our governments, to push our executive level to deliver on this resolution, to come up with action plans. Last year in during annual session of OSCE PA, we actually approved a resolution, a supplementary item, as we say it in our language in OSCE PA, on youth engagement. And one of our demands was also calling on participating states of OSCE to work on these action plans. So we also actually are connected to this norm that resolution sets. And luckily, we have also since 1 year a network of young parliamentarians amongst us, and they have put this item also on high on their agenda. And I am really very happy that now more and more young parliamentarians in our assembly are really acting as such and voicing the relevant issues for young people. So now we have to actually come up with the next step in our own assembly. And this webinar is a part of that. We would like to have today actually to inform us all together where we stand so that we understand, okay, what are the good practices? What can we learn from, the countries that have already done? And I am very, very honored and happy that we have also representative from the United Nations Secretary General's office of actually the office of United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy on Youth, and we will hear from them, I think, a good overview of where we stand, and that's very important for us. So understand where we stand, what kind of instruments we have, which could help us actually to deliver on the resolution. And secondly, as I told, we will hear very concrete example of Finland, a governmental side, and I hope also parliamentary side of that. And then we have also on our agenda to listen to the young people themselves. We will have the representative of a network of young peace builders with us, and I am sure that there we will also learn about their experiences. And finally, I hope that we can today actually give the start sign to an informal working group of our own assembly, where we will have this dedicated parliamentarians, hopefully, that they come together and they work on the issue of, how to learn more, how to really, as parliamentarians, can we have better exchanges, what kind of platform we need, so that we can engage with our governments and push for the implementation of the resolution. So an informal working group inside our parliament and inside our assembly which will push for the implementation of this resolution. So this is actually the aim of the day. This is the program that we have. I will shortly, as I said, introduce also our guests, because we will start with two opening remarks by two excellent ladies, and I will actually introduce them, and then we will have a panel discussion, and then of course question and answer, and also ideas. Please come up with the ideas that you have, not only question and answer, but so that this is something that we all together own it, and we all together actually have to work on this process. But first, I would like to invite our own president of OSCE PA, Madam Margaret Seidefeld.
Thank you very much, Farah. Very kind of you. Thank you,
Yeah,
dear young parliamentarians. It's a true pleasure to meet with you once again before our annual session. And I can tell you, Sweden, we have a very short summer, but this week it's excellent. It's about 25 degrees and Parliament will close next week. So it's busy days here, and I suppose it's the same for all of you. We have busy days, and that's the way it should be. I am very pleased to join today's discussion, and I think it's important. But let me also say that my first step as president when I was elected was to appoint a special representative on youth, because as Farah Karimi said, the UN Security Council Resolution 2050 is important for our work in the Assembly and for multilateral organizations. But that's not all. We do also have our own decision on the resolution on effective youth engagement towards secure, inclusive and democratic societies. And I think that's a very important resolution for us to work after. And with this behind, I took the initiative to appoint Ms. Farah Karimi as a special representative on youth. So thank you for accepting my question, Farah. And I know that you are very busy also with other duties inside the Assembly. But I would also like to say here immediately that it's also you as young people who have taken the initiative to the network by yourself. And I think this shows also that there is a strength inside young people to take steps forward. And those should be, this initiative should be promoted, of course, and from the organization. So I'm grateful for this. But I would also like to initially say thank you to the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Ms. Yatma Vikramanyake. I'm sorry for my very bad pronunciation, who was not able to join us, but representatives from her office are here to contribute to today's discussions. And I think this is really important because OSCE have also are associated to United Nations. And during these days, with insecurity, with Russia's war against Ukraine, there is an increased need for cooperation, international cooperation, multilateralism. So I'm grateful for that. But also, let me say, why is it important with young people in politics? Of course, young people get ready to vote and to stand for election at 18 years age in most countries. And if you are eligible to vote, you should of course also have the eligibility to be a member of parliament for an elected position. And believe me or not, I have also been young. And I know from my own experience, and I don't think it have changed so much, even if it changed, that it's not easy to take the first steps in politics, to be new elected. But I think with a network, there is a better way to build a base to move forward. And there need, of course, to be regulations like UN's recommendations, like OSCE's resolution. But there need also to be legislation on a national level. But let me mention once again, parties are so important. To be active in the party, to be nominated by the parties, to be active in the various party groups. So that's my message to you. Never, never just collect to a network consisting of young people. Keep that, because it's important. That's where you can build your network cross parties to get influence, both from other parties, but for OSCE from other countries. But be also active in your party groups, because you are elected parliamentarians. Most of you are not elected on an individual base. You are elected by your party, either on a list or when it's a proportional system, or personal vote if it's a representative system. This means that you need to have your party behind you. And a lot of parties have also network for young people. I think that's a good resource. But what makes OSCE extra? First of all, it's a multilateral organization, working with security, working with peace, but also the whole European security order. And it's difficult to build a network on these items back home in national parliament. But to be in OSCE, you can get both the knowledge, the network, and build your own experience on the international arena and multilateralism. That's why I think it's so important with the network on youth inside OSCE. And as already said by my dear colleague Farah, I think as well that the knowledge by young people and engagements need to be there in the politics. You have more knowledge of technology than most of us have. You have your visions, you have your skills with communication. And I think this is important. It's very important. I know also that we are worried as people among various issues. Some are more worried about the situation for old age people. Some are more worried maybe about the climate. Some are more worried about the artificial intelligence. Some are more worried about finance. But it's very, not only from individual. We could see that there is a pattern when it comes to young people. We could see where there is a pattern when it's come to gender. And this shows that it's so important with young people. I would also say that we as parliamentarians, we should also bring with us back home what we learn and establish in an international organization. You have all been appointed to be a member of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in your national delegation. But bring with you back home what you learn here, because that's also a contribution back home to your national parliament. For example, the OSCE resolution and the UN resolution. Ask questions in your party, with the government, write bills. That's one way to increase the level of young parliamentarians. And also, raise your voice inside your party, so young people get nominated. And I was actually looking a bit about, before this meeting, what does it look like in my parliament with the representation of young parliamentarians. And I noticed that in Sweden, young parliamentarians is about 20%. This means parliamentarians between 18 and 30 years old. It's about 20%. I think that's pretty good, because that's about the population. Young people are about that percentage of the population. I noticed also when it was to European Parliament, I was surprised in a positive way. The country with the youngest parliamentarians overall in European Parliament is Malta. And then it was my country, Sweden. So it means that there is possibility for young MPs to take part everywhere. And I am, of course, also eager to hear about the work in Finland. But what I would like to say here, that I think it's a combination of all different warriors' goals. It's a combination of a strategic thinking. It's a vision of the parties. And it's, of course, with a resolution in the background. And let me say one more thing why it's so important with young people's engagement. It's about the future. If young people are not engaged, there is a huge risk that young people will not be engaged when they are elderly as well. So I think it's good to have already at early age and political engagement. And one more thing, I think it's important for all of us, not only young people, also for those of us who are elderly, to think about what steps can we take to promote young people, to promote young parliamentarians. Because it's not only an issue for youngsters, it's also an issue for all us who are a little bit older, to include young people. And it should be at all political level, as mentioned earlier. And I'm glad to notice that Secretary General is with us as well today, because I know that this is also a question that is very close to Secretary General Roberto Montella's heart, and he is also having an eye, or maybe two, on young parliamentarians' work. And by this, I would like to give the floor back to Farah Karimi, and also, of course, say welcome to all our speakers, and particular welcome to all the young parliamentarians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Margareta. Like always, it's very interesting to hear the personal experiences shared by you, and I think this is very helpful. So thank you very much, and thank you for your indeed support for the youth participation, political participation, and engagement, and that is very much appreciated. Thank you very much, Margareta. So now we will have a video address by UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Ms. Jayatma Vikramanayake. She unfortunately was not able to join our event, as Margareta already mentioned, due to other commitments. And I had personally the pleasure of meeting her last year during my official visit to United Nations, and we were ensured that we have a full support of her office in our initiatives. And I know that Ms. Raquel Correa from the Office of the Envoy is also present here, who is our main focal point in the UN for youth participation. And I would like to sincerely thank her for our great cooperation. I hope we will continue and expand our great common work in the near future, because as already our president mentioned, it is very important, multilateralism and cooperation between the different actually regional organizations and international organizations. So thank you for that. Now, I would kindly ask actually my colleagues from Secretariat to start the video address.
Dear friends and colleagues, I'm pleased to address this important meeting on youth, peace and security, and I would like to thank the organizers for convening this discussion. Occasions such as this remind us that youth participation is and should always be at the heart of peace and security. And I would especially like to recognize young people here today and all those who have been working hard to ensure that these discussions reflect young people's concerns and aspirations for a peaceful, just and inclusive society. Since 2015, the historic adoption of Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace and security has shifted the global perspective and the narrative of viewing youth as security threats or passive beneficiaries into recognizing them as equal partners and active agents of peace building. Two additional Youth, Peace and Security Resolutions 2419 and 2535 have also been adopted by the Security Council, specifically calling for the meaningful inclusion of youth in negotiating and implementing peace agreements and provide concrete steps for operationalizing this agenda. At the United Nations, working collaboratively with partners, we have developed tools and resources such as the Guide for Public Officials to advance the practical implementation of these international frameworks, and the first of its kind 5-year strategic action plan on youth-inclusive peace processes. Globally, 4 countries now have national action plans on youth, peace and security. We have also witnessed political statements from governments on advancing the youth, peace and security agenda and its integration in regional frameworks. While these certainly represent important steps in the right direction, there is still a great deal to be done in strengthening youth participation in peace building and concretely translating these policy frameworks into action. We cannot sit idle. We must continue to push for operationalizing this agenda with and for young people. I would like to take this opportunity to share 3 key recommendations to ensure that young people are supported as equal partners and powerful actors in peace building. First, youth must be included at the forefront of policy making, not as an afterthought. Young people are often seen as naive and lacking experience, but they have a profound understanding of interconnected issues of sustainable development, human rights, and peace. Therefore, it is crucial to include them in conversations and decision making that directly affects their lives and their futures. Second, the discomfort in including young people's voices needs to end. They continue to face challenges such as discrimination and repercussions from political or armed actors. This makes our duty to ensure safe and empowering spaces for young people to lead and fully participate even more important. Third, young people must be equipped with necessary resources to sustain their work on conflict prevention and peacemaking. As called by the Secretary General's new agenda for peace, it is fundamental to invest in prevention efforts. These funds, these resources must be sufficient, flexible, and uninterrupted for youth organizations, especially for those who depend on volunteers. Echoing the recommendations of the second report of the Secretary General on Youth, Peace and Security, I encourage all member states to set up specific funds for youth-led peace building while considering setting aside minimum allocations in their official development assistance to support efforts towards youth-focused and youth-led peace building. Dear friends, the Youth, Peace and Security agenda was created by young people all over the world, and they should therefore be supported to mobilize and lead these efforts. Investing in youth is key to achieving lasting peace and creating more just societies, especially in fragile contexts where youth are the majority of the population. We can only do that if and when we dismantle myths, misconceptions, and stereotypes about youth leadership. Decision makers must not only be willing to share the table, but they must be actively willing to share power with young people. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I think these were really very important points made by the envoy, and I am now actually happy to be able to introduce our expert panel, because that's where we are going to have discussion and also interaction with you all. And this is really great. How we are going to do is that I will introduce our speakers. We are going to have 3 speakers. First, actually, the first speaker, and then after that, there will be time for question and answer. And then we move to the second speaker, and then, of course, finally to the third speaker. And first on my list is Ms. Romero Ortiz Quintila, Program Management Officer in the Office of Envoy on Youth. Romero specifically works on the topics of democracy and political participation and interconnections with youth, peace and security agenda, and will be able to provide us with some overview of the agenda and hopefully share some ideas how we as parliamentarians can also be part of this process, active part of this process. We are already, but to be even more active. So please, dear Romero, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Farah Karimi, and thank you so much to the OSCE for convening this webinar, to the members of the Parliamentary Assembly and young parliamentarians joining today. It's really my pleasure to be with you. I've prepared some slides that hopefully will support my presentation. So let me quickly share. Hopefully you can see it correctly. So, and also good morning from New York, and good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are coming from. So I would like to start a little bit by unpacking what is this Youth, Peace and Security Agenda and the UN Security Council resolution. It was already alluded by the opening remarks, but I think it's very important that we understand first the road towards the adoption of the first ever resolution on youth, peace and security by the Security Council, and really understanding that this resolution came as a response to the advocacy efforts of young people and other stakeholders and the need for the recognition of youth as peace builders. We heard it already from the Youth Envoy. Historically, there has been a very negative narrative and image associated to young people when it comes to peace and security. And unfortunately, we see that in certain contexts, it hasn't really changed. So we still see young people portrayed as victims of conflict, and most of the time referring to young women. Or on the other side, young people portrayed as perpetrator of violence, referring to young men. Resolution 2250 really comes in that sense to acknowledge that the vast majority of young people actually are peace builders and play a vital role in their communities, in, for instance, preventing violence during election, fostering social cohesion, or leading reconciliation efforts. I think it's also very important in the context that we are talking today in this webinar that we also recognize that including young people in peace and security effort is also a democratic matter. So if you look at some of the figures that we have on the slide right now, we clearly see that we cannot talk about sustainable development, peace, humanitarian action if we exclude the majority of the population in certain countries who are young people, or young people who are most of the time the most impacted by conflict and violence. So as we move forward, and in the context in looking how do we actually move forward and accelerate the implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, it's very crucial to be reminded that this advocacy effort, the Youth for Peace movement, really started from the grassroots by young people. And I'm very glad to see that in the panel, we also have a representation from UNOI Peace Builders to really acknowledge and see the needs, the recommendation coming from young peoples and young peace builders themselves. So in this context, of course, I'm also very proud to say that some of the key stakeholders to advance the agenda, to lobby and advocate for the adoption of the 2250 resolution was also our office, the Office of the United Nations Secretary General Envoy on Youth, very much present and active in this effort since the appointment of the first ever Youth Envoy. But of course, this work has continued by our current envoy, Jayadma Vikamranayake. So as it was mentioned already, few years, 8 years that the Security Council adopted the first ever resolution on youth peace and security, and that recognize the importance of young people's participation in peace building. So the first legal framework also that provides the resolution is the 2250 resolution that provides these 5 pillars on youth peace and security agenda, and that provides already a framework of action plan of work that we can take to advance the implementation of the agenda on youth peace and security. So that we see a first pillar, participation. It was already mentioned. We need to consider and see how do we increase representation of youth in decision making at all levels. Protection, another pillar very important to the question of youth peace and security, and unfortunately an increased matter on the table on how do we actually ensure that young people's participation is safe and safeguarded. So how do we protect civilians, and how do we recognize the particular vulnerability of young people when they engage in peace and security? Prevention. How do we enable an environment where young people are recognized and provided with the support needed to implement violence prevention? So I think this pillar also talks very much about the work that young people and youth-led organizations are doing to prevent violence and conflict in their own communities. Partnership, of course, I think this webinar is also an example of the question of partnership and how this is central to advance the implementation of the youth peace and security agenda. This is not a question of a single actor, but how do we work together through different intergovernmental organizations, to national bodies, to, of course, youth groups, youth-led organizations, civil society, academia, private sector, and others to work together to advance the agenda? And how does that also translate into financial, technical, and logistical support that we have heard very clearly also from the remarks from the youth envoy? And then finally, the pillar on disengagement and reintegration. So when we have had parts of the population or youth involved in violent conflicts, how do we ensure that they are actually be able to reintegrate civil life? And how do we actually recognize and work with them towards their very specific needs in that sense? So I want to show you in the next slide also a little bit of an overview of what has happened since 2015, as we mentioned, was the year that the Security Council adopted the first ever resolution on youth peace and security. I won't go towards each milestone, but it's just to give you an idea of the importance of very key moments that led to the adoption, but also that have followed into ensuring the implementation and advancement of the youth peace and security agenda. So we see, for instance, and I will zoom in into some of them, but the launch of a progress and independent study on youth peace and security. We see the UN also adopting youth strategy, and I know that has been similar for other institutions. We have seen some key events gathering different stakeholders to discuss on how we advance youth peace and security. What does it mean in practice? We have had research, policy papers. We had subsequent resolution adopted by the Security Council, keeping the momentum around the youth peace and security. So again, very important milestone since 2015. So to zoom into some of those milestones, I would like to start by the Missing Peace study, which is the independent progress study on youth peace and security. And basically the resolution 2250 requested the Secretary General of the United Nations, and I quote, to carry out a progress study on the youth positive contribution to peace processes and conflict resolution in order to recommend effective responses at local, national, regional, and international level. So really this study brings, and that was published in 2015, present the state of the art of youth peace and security, present what young people are doing, which are the opportunities, challenges, and recommendation that falls into 3 big categories: invest, involve, and partner with young people. So again, I'm flagging those some of those milestones, some of those tools and resources, because this is also very important as we look on how to implement the youth peace and security agenda, to refer back to those important pieces so that we have an informed implementation of the youth peace and security agenda. It was already mentioned also in the video message by the Youth Envoy, but since the adoption of the first resolution on youth peace and security, we had reports from the Secretary General that focuses specifically on youth peace and security, that looks at the current status and the advancement of the implementation of the agenda and recommendation on how to move forward. And then we also had, as mentioned previously, the Security Council adopted a subsequent resolution 2419 on youth participation in peace processes, and the 2535 that looks more into the pillar of protection, but also the coordination and coherence of youth peace and security activities across the system, and really seeing how can we actually track the implementation of those resolutions, because now there is also a question of monitoring and accountability towards the youth peace and security agenda. So looking into those resolutions can also give and shed some light into some very concrete action-oriented plan and recommendation on how to move forward. I also would like to mention maybe three other resources that might be useful as we advance in the youth peace and security agenda. So out of the high-level global conference on youth inclusive peace processes that was co-organized by our office, we had two main outputs. One, which is this youth peace and security guide for public officials, that I believe it's extremely relevant for the context of looking at how do we actually translate this agenda at the national level, and that really provides practical tools, resources for decision makers on how to implement the youth peace and security agenda at the country level, and also concrete and compile concrete example on how it is advancing at national and regional level. And then we also had, as another output from that conference, was the 5-year strategy on youth inclusive peace processes. So really looking into what is the framework needed to advance the meaningful inclusion of young people in peace processes. And then also a last mention to the If I Disappear report, which is a global report on protecting young people in civic spaces. We have seen how the civic spaces and the access to civic spaces by young people is shrinking. So how can we ensure safety and protection of young people who are engaged in peace and security efforts? I would like to now, as I soon wrap up the first presentation, I would like to zoom a little bit into this intersection between political participation and the youth peace and security agenda. And see what concrete action can be taken by members of parliaments, by young parliamentarians to really promote and advance the youth peace and security agenda. So in that sense, first, I would like to mention the question of ensuring youth political participation and youth representation in decision-making spaces, and also including strategy to engage more young women in politics. So this is, of course, very much connected to the 20-50 resolution, the participation pillar that was already mentioned. But unfortunately, we see that participation of young people in formal politics spaces is not yet a reality. Although more than half of the world population is under 30 years old, only 2.7% of the members of parliament worldwide are under 30, and less than 1% of young members of parliament are actually women. So young people continue to face structural, economic, legislative, and cultural barriers that prevent them to access and participate in formal political spaces. So I think we really need to approach, and from our office, we are really approaching the question of representation, but also access and participation in decision-making spaces from and as a human right issue. And we are also guided by the Youth 2030 UN strategy, where youth participation, human rights, youth peace and security are extremely present and prominently mentioned. And we have been able throughout the year to really work closely with different partners to further advance the question of youth political participation through, for instance, the Not Too Young to Run campaign that advocates for the alignment between eligibility age to run for office and the voting age. We had a call to action on young women's political participation. And recently, our office launches the Be Seen, Be Heard campaign in collaboration with the Body Shop that really looks at and aims at amplifying the voices of young people and actively promoting young people's participation in political life in more than 75 countries and territories, and looking at very specific advocacy objectives such as lowering the voting age, alignment of the eligibility age and the voting age, increasing youth representation in formal government structures such as youth council, etc. So in that sense, and looking from the eyes of members of parliament, another way of promoting the youth peace and security agenda in this intersection with youth political participation is to ensure the youth participation in coordination mechanism. So as young elected officials and members of parliament, you can definitely lead and support YPS work within the Parliamentary Commission, the coordination mechanism, and to create spaces for monitoring and ensuring accountability of the implementation of the YPS agenda. But also to create and support youth bodies in Parliament, to ensure that we have mechanisms to ensure systematic consultation of young people in parliamentary deliberation. And then it was already mentioned to advocate for the adoption of national action plans, roadmap frameworks, and establishment of national coalition of youth peace and security. So it was mentioned we already have 5 national roadmaps and action plans in Finland, Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Philippines. And I'm very glad that we have a representation from Finland to hear more about that, how that process went and how it can inspire other countries to do the same. And then just to end, the question of budget allocation, that's something that can really put forward in the agenda by the different young members of parliament to ensure that we have resources available for young peace builders and groups that need, in general, investment, but also to track the resources that are spent into the youth peace and security agenda. So with that, I think I stop here and look forward to continuing the discussion and to hear from the other panelists today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Romero. That was really a very comprehensive introduction, and I think that gives us a very good base to for our conversations. And you again emphasized actually the points that also the envoy had done, but that's good to repeat it again and again so that we actually are clear how important this is: participation, protection, prevention, and partnerships. And of course, if the things go wrong, what you said, disengagement, reintegration, I think these are very important pillars, and we will come back to that, I'm sure, in our conversation. We have a parliamentarian. I'm very happy that she is with us. Yevenila Kravchuk from Ukraine, and I am really happy that she has been able to connect, and she asked for floor, and I think it is very good that we invite her to address us and to intervene. And I understand that your internet connection is not best, something that we can imagine very well. But Yevenila, you are very welcome to take the floor.
Yes, thank you so much, Farah, and all the distinguished guests. I will try to go on with video. If the internet would not be the best, I will just turn it off. So I'll start so you would at least see my face at the beginning. Yes, I decided to join this panel because probably it's worth telling how youth is in Ukraine, which is under war of aggression. And well, probably we should understand that all of the resolutions that United Nations and other international organizations pass, they have to work and they have to be, practical, I would say. So what, besides regarding the, youth participating in the parliaments, I was 34 when I was elected. I'm women. There are 20 percent of women in Ukrainian parliament. So we're trying our best to make this percentage of youth both and women higher participating in Ukrainian politics. So of course, it had been the war of aggression since the 24th of February, the full-scale invasion, I would say, but the war is continuing since the 2014. And in this regard, we have to understand that already, those who were kids, little kids in 2014, now are more than 18 years, and actually some of them are on the front in the army, saving their country, part of Ukrainian army. It's a pity, and it's very sad because Russian occupiers on the territories that they occupied since 2014 are taking Ukrainian youth into Russian army, making them fight
this is really a pity. Yevgenia, can you hear us? We lost you. This is one of course, very concrete impacts of a war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, as we witness it actually clearly. Very simple. Yes.
returned.
Are you back?
Yes, I'm back. I don't know on what point you lost me, but I guess
you were explaining actually that some kids or young people were taken by Russia to
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. As you know, and it's actually we see it now after the 24th of February. Russians are trying to erase the national identity of Ukrainian kids. So imagine what had happened on the territory of Crimea and of occupied Crimea, and on those territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions that were occupied in 2014. It had been a propaganda for 9 years. They changed all the curriculum in the schools, and now they're taking those kids that were kids in 2014. Now they're taken to the army to fight their own people. And that's, a war crime, as everything is, going on in Ukraine as well. But also what connects to the resolution is how we would reintegrate first the veterans, because now I would say the average age of the veteran would be like 25 plus. So these are quite young people, and they have to be to get the needed psychological help, to have the professional trainings, to be able to adapt to the normal life. And of course, I believe that there should be a great part for youth during the reconstruction process, because it will take years, but it is this reconstruction process, and actually our EU accession is for the young people, because they will live in this country. They are the future of Ukraine. And another thing that we would have to do, and I hope that it could be supported by international organizations, is the reintegration of the youth of the temporary occupied territories that we liberate. And I think one of the projects that could be launched is the exchange visits from youth of another region going to another region. I mean, inside of Ukraine, but we're a big country, we're the biggest country in Europe. So it differs. There are some cultural peculiarities. So I believe that these exchanges would bring youth together and help them to adapt and to be detoxicated from this propaganda that was on these territories for years and years. And of course, I think that we have to, we could be at least a bit proud, because even during the full-scale invasion, we are implementing the legislation that was passed before the 24th of February, and it's the new legislation on the basic principles of youth policy. And it actually was built up on the principles of the UN resolution we're discussing right now. And even during the 2022, during the full-scale invasion, we were able to establish new 120 youth councils. And also there is we created the Ukrainian Youth Foundation under this legislation that has to disperse the grants some small money for NGOs made by youth to be participate, to participate more in local life, in government, in political life, and so on and so forth. Right now, we are discussing with European Union. As you know, Ukraine is the official candidate, so we see our future in European Union. We discussed the 7-year program on EU-Ukraine youth program, so that European Union could also, help to support youth movement in Ukraine. I hope that something could be established within or supported by OSCE, for example, some projects targeting youth in Ukraine. And I think we could think something, maybe I'll be in Vancouver for the summer session. We could talk about it more. So that's my short intervention. But of course, the only way, to make the life of youth normal in Ukraine is to win this war, to win over the aggressor, and to deoccupy our territories. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yevgenia. I think it was really great, your intervention, because it practically shows what is going on when you have to live under such an aggression and a war. And what you made really very clear is what it does with the lives of young people. And this point that you made, the kids of Crimea, when it was occupied, are now actually soldiers and have to defend their own country. This is such an example showing how devastating actually a war can be and occupation can be. And of course, this right to self-defense, that's very well respected right of Ukrainian people, but it will impact the lives of young people. So, and the points that you raised, like, the reintegration of this young people, this generation, into normal life, after once the war is over. I think this is really very important point that you make, and this is something that we as OSCE PA should absolutely talk about it and discuss it and see what is the responsibility of, again, different countries in supporting Ukraine in doing so. So thank you for sharing that and joining us from Kiev. So thank you very much. Are other actually colleagues who would like to intervene or to ask a question to Romero before we moving to case of Finland? If so, please mention it in the chat. Otherwise, we will move to hear from Anu Apo from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland about their experience. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Romero, again, thank you very much for your contribution. I was wondering whether is it possible to share your presentation with us. And I saw also in the chat some links to documents. I think it's also important to share that with everybody. So thank you very much. Thank you again. And maybe at the end of the session, we will come back to you. So thank you for now. As I said, next on my list is Ms. Anu Apo from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland. And what I already mentioned is, of course, that Finland is the only country in the OSCE area that adopted a national action plan on youth, peace and security, recognizing the positive and active role of youth in preventing and resolving conflicts, building peace and preventing violent extremism. Ms. Apo serves as the national coordinator for youth, peace and security in Finland, and hopefully will be able to share with us the experience of process that led to adoption of the action plan and will help us to discuss some best practices and lessons learned. So, dear Ms. Apo, floor is yours and very welcome. I don't see Manu Chair.
Miss Apple, we don't hear you. Can you just check your audio connection?
So, Miss Apple, could someone from technical support look and see what is going on? No?
Miss Karimi, should we just move to the next speaker and we'll try to solve the issue meanwhile?
That's okay. Good suggestion, Manager. Thank you very much. So that means then we will hear actually Mr. Mario Savelli, President and co-founder of Sustainable Cooperation for Peace and Security. Mr. Savelli is also representing the international steering group of the United Network of Young Peace Builders, a global network uniting 132 youth organizations in 69 countries and working on promotion of the role of young people in conflict prevention and resolution, meaningful youth participation and partnerships. So I really believe that it is important to have young people also present here and to hear their voices. So dear Marius, floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, dear Madam Karimi. And first of all, I am really glad and super happy to be in a panel like this, because I've never seen in a panel where almost everyone is a women leader, and I am the only one that is a man leader. So I'm really glad, and I hope to see more panels like this. So congratulations for the great work that you are doing. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do my presentation. I think someone from the OSCE is going to help me a bit. Okay, that's amazing. Perfect. Can you go to the second slide, because it's just a hi. Next one, please.
So yes, there we are.
Perfect. As you can see, I represent the United Network of Young Peace Builders, and within the United Network of Young Peace Builders, I also represent Sustainable Cooperation for Peace and Security. At the United Network of Young Peace Builders, I'm representing the International Steering Group, as I have been elected by the European organizations. And with the Sustainable Cooperation for Peace and Security, I work basically on the peace building, promoting the youth peace and security agenda in Italy. And then I network with other organizations worldwide. Next slide, please. As you can see here, the United Network of Young Peace Builders, it's a global network composed of more than 130 youth-led peace building organizations that are based more than 70 countries in the world. And also the secretary itself of the United Network of Young Peace Builders, that is based in The Hague in the Netherlands, is led by young people itself. So the secretary and the whole more than 130 leading organizations that are there are led by young people. For over 30 years, we as UNOI have been working to end the violence of young people's exclusion. And basically UNOI exists for three reasons. One is transform the power structures that exclude young people from decision-making. Second, build sustainable spaces for young people to shape decisions that affect them. And third, connect people to partners for peaceful, inclusive society. Next slide, please. Here you can see more or less a summary of the work that UNOI is doing. You can see our network with the dots where our organizations are based, like in the 6 regions. UNOI is divided in 6 regions: the Americas, Asia, East and Southern Africa, Europe, Middle East and North Africa, and West and Central Africa. Sometimes we also challenge ourselves as critical thinkers. We have our podcast where we talk about peace, and it's called the Peace Corner Podcast. And next time you are also invited to join us and to talk about peace together on the work that we are all are doing. Next slide, please. So basically, UNOI works on 3 pillars that are advocacy, capacity development, and network. As advocacy, we work to transform the power structures that exclude young people from decision making. And our continuous endeavor is to change the narrative about young people's participation in and contribution to peace processes, and the way how young people are portrayed as susceptible to one of the 2 roles, as was mentioned before by the previous panelist, Romeral, that is like young people are portrayed or as victims or as perpetrators of violence in armed conflicts. For this reason, we have a number of ways to counter this inaccurate and reductionist narrative and transform the current power structures to be more inclusive and representative for our world population. We, as UNOI, don't work alone and don't work only with our members, but we also advocate for youth-led peace building at local, national, regional, and international level through liaising with governments, UN agencies, and other relevant stakeholders to ensure the delivery of UNOI's advocacy message. Our work is to demonstrate the impact of young people's contribution to peace by building evidence through the reports and case studies, and sometimes also with our podcasts. Finally, we support our members in strengthening their advocacy strategies, providing representational opportunities, and engaging specific stakeholders with young peace builders. So basically, this is what I do, like mainly representation, as this is my role as international steering group. Next slide, please. The second pillar is capacity development. And as you can see, part of our mission is to build like sustainable spaces for young people to shape decisions that affect them, developing young people's capacities to affect positive change for peace in their communities through training programs that are based on non-formal methodologies. We have training programs implemented by our pool of trainers that are coming from the 6 regions that I mentioned before, and that has been working closely with the regional coordinators to identify the skills and capacities that our members need to successfully carry out their work as young peace builders. Another way we support young people's work for peace is by developing resources that are specifically tailored to their needs of young peace builders and youth organizations. We have some examples of tools that we have delivered that are like the learning curve, the toolkit on United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250, and the Youth for Peace toolkit training. Next slide, please. Network. This is my favorite pillar, and I think this is the most important, but it's just a personal decision. And as you can see here, part of our mission is to connect people to partner for peaceful and inclusive societies. And as a global network that has like more than 130 organizations, UNOI Peace Builders is rich in experience, skill, and knowledge in different fields of peace building and geographical context. We are committed to continue representing and amplifying the richness and diversity of youth-led peace building throughout the world. And at the same time, our organizations are facing same challenges, from lack of trust among like decision makers to lack of resources as well. For this reason, we are committed to providing spaces to showcase the work of youth-led organizations that learn from each other and foster cooperation and partnerships. With this slide, I close more or less the description of what UNOI is doing and what we basically are doing. To the next slide, we are going to open a bit, talking a bit some concrete examples that UNOI has done, like in supporting the implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security agenda. And next slide, please. Here we have 2 cases. I'm mentioning basically Cameroon and Nigeria. I'm not going to mention Finland because we're going to have the representative of Finland that is going to talk specifically about Finland. But as you can see here, we have members in Cameroon, we have members in Nigeria, and Nigeria has already implemented the National Action Plan on the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250. Cameroon is on the way. What we have done as UNOI, first of all, we have developed resources to work on the advocacy level for this resolution, where these resources were given to both the members that were in Nigeria and Cameroon. We have delivered advocacy trainings. We have delivered peer learning sessions, and we have also shared best practices. So what works in a country and what doesn't work in a country, so we can learn from each other to better implement the next national action plans. And basically, I'm working to push for a national action plan at Italian level, at European Union level. Next slide, please. Here it comes your involvement as parliamentarians. I know that the OSCE is divided into two structures. One is the Parliamentary Assembly, and the other one is more governmental, where we have like a lot of ambassadors basically that are coming together. I know that in the governmental part of the OSCE, there is already a working group on youth, peace, and security, but it's done at ambassadorial level. Here we are at the Parliamentary Assembly, and in the next slide, please, I'm going to tackle a bit like how we can support the work of the Parliamentary Assembly to raise awareness, and what can parliamentarians do raising awareness on the youth, peace, and security agenda. First of all, parliamentarians are coming from different countries, and in their countries, they can raise awareness about the resolution. They can talk about the resolution. They can organize conferences inviting civil society organizations. Second, they can advocate for adoption of national action plan to their respective governments. I know that every government is working differently on the national action plan. Majority of Western countries, for example, here in Europe, the national action plan is implemented by the ministers of foreign affairs, sometimes in collaboration with youth ministries, because they see it as like more an external thing. But I think it's more important that Western countries start to develop national action plans also inside their countries, so they don't see it only as an external thing. I can just mention you, for example, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda that is a similar framework. I know that Italy, for example, has implemented this agenda only through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I think it's important that countries start to recognize how to implement the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda also internally. I mean, like Western countries, because they basically implement it to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Third thing is being a YPS guardian. What does it mean? Basically, civil society organizations have already done a lot of work on implementing resources about the youth, peace, and security agenda, and I can give like some opinions also to governments on how to implement a national action plan. But what happens when the governments sometimes implement a national action plan? They can just exclude the work of civil society. They just don't take it into consideration. They start a new framework. So here it comes the role of the parliamentarians. They can be a guardian, they can be a watchguard, so they can include civil society organizations and the meaningful work that they have done to the national action plan, so this work is not just wasted. And they can also make sure that civil society organizations are part of the implementation of the national action plan. Fourth, there are already civil society organizations, coalitions, or individuals that are working on the youth, peace, and security agenda. It's important that parliamentarians engage with them, invite them in national parliaments, for example, to talk and raise awareness about the agenda. And last thing, it will be meaningful if parliamentarians advocate for increasing the number of young parliamentarians at the President Bureau of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. I know that there is a President Bureau, and here it would be important if you can advocate about increasing the number of young parliamentarians in the Bureau. I cannot be part of it because I'm not a parliamentarian, but I can advocate for raising the number of young people there. Last thing that I think here we as civil society can be included is supporting the creation of a youth, peace, and security working group at the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, including civil society representatives, alongside with parliamentarians. I think this is something feasible, and we have the right people here that can create, can open the space for this working group. And I see that we have already a hand raised, but should I go to the next slide or should I take a question? It's not so long. It's
no, yes, please finish your actually contribution, and then we will go to the question and answer.
Okay, perfect. Next slide, please. Great. As you can see here, as parliamentarians, if you go to the website of the United Network of Young Peace Builders, you can download our resources. There is a toolkit that's to support public officials in operationalizing YPS. Sorry, it was really a difficult word. At the country level. This guide is titled Implementing the YPS Agenda at Country Level, a guide for public officials. It's 70 pages, and I'm not able to summarize it in slides, but if you want to learn more, you can go and dig in details about it. But more or less, I already tackled a general overview on what parliamentarians can do. And in the next slide, that is the last slide, you can find our contact details if you want to engage and reach out to us, but you already have them as we are here. So we don't need to show the last one. Perfect. I think I'm done here, and I was within 10 minutes. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marius. It was really very clear from your presentation what you do, and also your recommendations to parliamentarians, how they could really work on advancing the agenda of youth, peace and security. So thank you for sharing that. And you did also advocate for OSCE-PA to do things, so that's always great. On working group, I already said that we want to start with this actually informal working group. And I think your suggestion include the civil society is also a good suggestion. So we will talk about that. And I'm happy really to stay in touch with you and see what are your ideas about that. And I think our President Margareta Sederfeld wants to react very short on your suggestion on participation of young parliamentarians in our bureau. Margareta, please.
Thank you very much, Farah. And thank you, Marius Savelli, for your recommendations, which I think is very important. Let me just mention, I think it's important that young parliamentarians are not only sitting in networking about the importance of young parliamentarians. That's why I also have appointed a member of the network from young parliamentarians as member of the ad hoc committee on migration, Mr. David Stigmüller from Austria, and for the ad hoc committee on counterterrorism, Ms. Maya Karapatyan from Armenia, because I think it's important to use the possibilities that there are. And that's the possibility I have as a president. What I also have done, just to mention, is this time as well, promoting activities in the party groups, because when it comes to elections, to participations, it's important to know who is doing the election, it's the members, but who is nominating. And so far, it's mostly the various party groups. And there is also between the leaders of the party groups exchange views and maybe negotiations. So it's always good to know, just as back home, when you are elected for a position, it's by the party to know which party group do I belong to and be active there. I think that's one important part. But then there is, of course, the network. That's very important. And I appointed Farah Karimi, a special rep, because I believe it's important also to have somebody who can connect and be a motor, and arrange this kind of network. But I must say, my presidency is going to its end, but I think it's a good question from young parliamentarians to rise for the next president what is your view of young parliamentarians? What will you do to promote young parliamentarians? Because to ask those questions, you are also making awareness.
Yeah, great.
So I believe strongly that it's important also to have somebody like Marius Chiavelli who comes from outside and ask those difficult questions and be a little bit of, what should I say, somebody who is running from behind and push, make something, do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Margareta. So I see Pia Kauma, our vice president and one of the candidates for our next presidency, raised the hand. Pia, I can't see you, but I see your hand. I guess your camera is okay. Now we can see you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Farah. Actually, I was motivated by Margareta Cederfeldt's speech because I think she raised a very important point there, saying that it really depends on who will be nominating the candidates. I've been observing elections in many countries, and of course, we as observers are always delighted when there is development in democracy. But very often it happens so that even though there is a 30% quota for young people and the other gender to be represented on the list of candidates, it doesn't directly mean that those people will eventually be elected to the parliament. Because very often parties use long lists where the young people and the women are placed at the end of the list. Or else they don't even reveal who will eventually be elected if people will vote for that particular party. So there needs to be openness and in order to show democracy from the point of view of young people as well as women. So this is very important for us as elected members of each parliament in different countries. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for your remarks, Pia. That's indeed a lot of work needs to be done on really creating the inclusive participation, young, gender, different colors, different backgrounds, people with migration background, and so on. So we have a lot to do. And are there any other questions for Marius? No? Then we go actually back to our guest from Finland, Anu Apu. I hope that the technical problems are solved and we can hear you, Anu.
Hello, let's see if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. So
fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. I'm so sorry about the technical issue. We sometimes have those when it's a Zoom connection. So thank you so much for inviting me and us to speak here in this event. It has been very fascinating to listen to the discussions and hear the viewpoints and strong arguments for the youth, peace and security agenda. So I'm the national coordinator for youth, peace and security agenda here in Finland at the MFA. And I would have many things to say, but I will dive straight to the topic that was asked and talk you about our national action plan. So our action plan was published in August 2001. So 2 years ago, we are now halfway through it. It covers the years 2021 to year 2024. And as it has been said, this was the first ever national action plan on youth, peace and security in the world. However, by no means have we been alone in this effort. We have heard that there are more action plans now that have been prepared and published. And also currently there are many more strategies, roadmaps, action plans underway and being prepared. I think this reflects the fact that there's a growing global recognition of the YPS agenda and the potential it has for building sustainable societies, which is something we really need in these days of many global and local crises. I'd like to point out that there were two main driving forces behind our action plan. The first was the Finnish youth. They were the ones who created political awareness and understanding that we really ought to implement the Security Council resolution. The second element, which is equally important, is the political commitment, which was then manifested at the level of government program in 2019. And I think these both factors have also been important when we have implemented our action plan. They have given it the push that it needs. Our national action plan was, and it is, a multi-stakeholder process. However, for us, the first rationale when we started the process was that the action plan should really reflect the needs and the agenda of the young people themselves. So accordingly, young people and the Finnish youth organizations played a very specific role in the preparation of the national action plan. From nationwide consultation round to thematic workshops to the actual drafting process, which was led by the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and also coordinated and taken part by other ministries, government agencies, civil society and academia. I think this open and youth-centered approach was very useful in many senses. By engaging the young people from the very beginning, we managed to guarantee the ownership of the youth to the process. And also we managed to ensure that the content of our national action plan was relevant to them. It has a strong emphasis on actions we also do here in Finland. And I think this has a straight relation to the fact that it was drafted together with young people. The coordinating body is the MFA, but still we have other ministries and stakeholders who implement the action plan here in Finland. Another aspect that was very important and useful in our process was that the young people brought their expertise to the table when the action plan was drafted. That was very, very important. It was a multi-stakeholder process, and when the discussions went on, also difficult issues could be tackled. We were drafting the text, and then we had to negotiate on some part of that. That was also an educational process for all the parties who took part. And finally, I think one of the greatest results of the open process was the fact that a network or even networks were created between civil society, academia, and ministries. So in a way, the process was almost as important as the end product itself. Now, if we want to look at our national action plan in more detail, I'm not going to go into particular details of it, but it covers the 5 priority sectors of the UN resolutions. It sets out concrete goals for those parties who are part of it, and across all the policy fields. We have some thematic focuses, which are climate change and new technologies. These have already been mentioned here as one of the key topics where we need the youth involvement. As the coordinating body, us, the MFA, we maintain regular dialogue with all the stakeholders of the process. One of the most formal ways of that dialogue is a monitoring group, which meets from 2 to 4 times a year to discuss the progress of the action plan. The monitoring group consists of other government representatives, civil society, academia, and importantly, the 2215 network of young people. And it's a good forum to share information, exchange ideas, and also coordinate our actions and plan events and promotion activities together. And also, it's a good forum for us as government representatives to explain to young people what we have done and perhaps what we have not done and why. I think the monitoring group is also one way to put in practice and demonstrate our commitment to one of the key principles of the Resolution 2250, which is the meaningful youth engagement. This I think is one of the common denominators of many of the actions and goals that we have written down in our national action plan. Meaningful youth participation, be it in peace processes, decision-making, dialogues, or peace building. This is something you find in many of those goals along the line. And it's not always easy. It's something we have to learn. Participation is different from meaningful participation. Now, I would like to give you a few examples of implementation and what we have done. We have aimed at encouraging and enabling dialogue between the youth and decision makers and politicians. We know that there are already existing structures for that, but we have found that there is a need to create more spaces for that kind of discussions. One of those dialogues took place last summer in the context of Nordic African Foreign Ministers meeting in Helsinki, where one of the sessions was devoted to a discussion between youth representatives and the ministries, and importantly, the young people taking the lead of the conversation. So this was a perspective change for the ministers. At the working level, a good example of this kind of a space and creating room for dialogue was a thematic workshop on climate change that took place in Helsinki this March. Similar events have been organized, and we find that there's a need for that. Now, in peace mediation has been one of the priorities of Finnish foreign and security policy. One concrete example of action in this field is the nomination of Foreign Minister's Special Representative on Peace Mediation in the Horn of Africa, Mr. Sultan Said Ahmed. In his work, Mr. Sultan has emphasized dialogue with the youth and youth inclusion. And being a young person himself has given him that additional benefit in connecting with young peace builders in his work. Then maybe as a last example, we have noticed that due to the growing interest towards the YPS work, there has been a demand for capacity building on how to implement the youth peace and security agenda and how to draft those national action plans and roadmaps. And as a reaction and response to this need, we hosted an in-person YPS implementation workshop in Helsinki last November. This workshop was co-organized by our partners in Search for Common Ground and UNOI, present here also today. And in the workshop, 34 participants from 14 different countries and 3 entities came together to discuss how to implement and how to advance the YPS agenda, how to learn more of it. OSCE was also present in that meeting. That was a good experience of peer learning, open discussion, networking, understanding other perspectives, a very, very good and intensive week in Helsinki. The unique feature of that workshop was that this was the first time representatives from governments were brought together with their youth counterparts to discuss this agenda and how to advance it in their own country level. So there was that specific feature to the event as well, and this could be easily duplicated. I think need still exists. Now, I have described you some of the things we have done. Obviously, there are much more, many of them implemented by our brave, impressive civil society members, youth who are very active in this agenda, others by other ministries. Of course, challenges also exist. There are several, starting from funding and budgeting to how to ensure diversity of the young people you include, how to reach those young people who are not there yet, how to find them. I think this is a shared challenge for all of us. At the international level, I think one of the challenges we see is the coordination. I feel there's a need and room for better coordination between the states in the YPS agenda. This is because we need to be effective in our work. So to share best practices, coordinate, exchange information, all that is very, very important. And I think this event, as it is, contributes to this end. Lastly, the role of parliamentarians. I really do believe this is an important one. As I said at the beginning, in Finland, the political support to the agenda has very, very strongly contributed to its advancement. It really is important. So I do encourage you to continue the good work you are already doing, to talk about YPS agenda, to learn more about it, and to see which are the ways it could be best implemented in your own national context and, of course, within the OSCE. We very much thank you for the opportunity to come here and tell us a bit of our experiences, and look forward to sharing our experiences and learning from you also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anu. I think it was really great to have your experience and the perspective, and what you really made clear is how important it is to organize the process as an inclusive process, and really to ensure the participation and contribution, meaningful participation and meaningful contribution of young people with a diverse background, to find them, to look really for them, and to have diversity in it, and also to organize the ownership which is broader than only Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but really these different stakeholders, and of course political will. Like everything else, if you want really to move further, you need the political will, and there, of course, the parliamentarians are part of the organizing of this political will. And in that sense, I think you had the right audience to emphasize this again. And I see my colleague Inka Hopsu from Finnish Parliament wants to add actually her experience to the conversation. Please, Inka, floor is yours, and maybe you can also switch on your camera, because we don't see you. I see only your hand.
I
yes.
try to do that.
Great.
Hello, Farah.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Can you see me and hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. And hello, other colleagues as well. And thank you to all the speakers. Very informative and interesting. I think I just say shortly about the friendship group which we established last year in the Finnish Parliament about the youth, peace and security. It has a long name. It's Youth, Peace and Security 2250 and Youth Participation Friendship Group. But this maybe also replies to Marius Seveli's speech, that what the parliamentarians can do, how can we open the doors to our parliaments. And since we have the form of friendship groups in our parliaments, I think many of you have for other countries, I thought with some colleagues that we could have one for the youth, peace and security resolution as well, just to broaden the knowledge that we have such a resolution, and also tell about the action plan to other members of the parliament. And this was the first aim, and then we have had good cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also the network of the youth organizations and humanitarian organizations, peace organizations. They have their own 2250 network. But if your countries, if they don't have this ready-made networks yet, they must have the youth platforms which you could use as the counterpart. But we have this network which meets monthly, and then we have joint meetings sometimes. Now we have 12 parliament members in the friendship groups from 6 different parties, which is, I think, very relevant and good. Some from opposition, some from government, I suppose a new one as well. We just have the government negotiations here in Finland. but to secure the continuous work of the friendship group, even though Parliament terms are changing. And we can do together with the youth networks written questions to minister, to organize meetings with the minister or ministry, do motions, all sorts of things. And also when we have foreign guests, we can invite the young people to join us and to discuss. I think this is very practical example and doesn't take too much effort from the Parliament members to organize it. And the young people, they are very, very talented, and I think always when we meet them, we gain more than we can give. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Inka. Indeed, a very practical way of approaching this issue to organize political will. And I see Pia Kauma, Vice President of OSCE-PA, wants also to intervene. Pia, floor is yours, please.
Now that we have Finns speaking here at this webinar, I would like to bring in one more topic, and that is the importance of civil society in sustaining peace. Because as you know, sustainable peace can only be achieved by long-lasting relationships, and it doesn't always have to do with very formal organizations. And I have a friend of mine who is a headmaster of Music Institute of my hometown, Espoo. She's the headmaster of Music Institute of Espoo, and she said that she has had, in the capacity of her work, cooperation with, for example, Afghanistan. And the idea has been such that when young people play in the same orchestra and they share the same love for music, they are less likely to raise weapons against each other. And this kind of work is very important, and it applies also to, let's say, football and any kind of team sports as well. So civil society organizations like that can play a big part in restoring peace. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Pia. Thank you. I think you really made a very, very important additional point too, and that was, I think, earlier in the presentation of also Romero, the point of these national coalitions. That I think this is a very important thing, and civil society is a very, very important key player in such a coalition. So in that sense, I think you again give this good examples of really dialogue, meeting, safe space. So this is sometimes in this complex situations, very small interventions can have a huge impact. This is what we know actually, for the bad and for the good. And I hope that if there is one learning from our webinar is this, that we need each other to exactly work on this very, very huge issue and challenge. I would like also to invite our Secretary General, Roberto Montello, who has been part of the webinar for the last 2 hours, also to share his thoughts with us. Please, Roberto, floor is yours.
It's working, the volume? Yeah.
Yes.
It's working, yeah. Hi, Farah. No, thank you very much. I've been told I have to be very short, so I'll be very short. Now, I just wanted to thank you, Farah, for the initiative, and also Manu Chair and the colleagues here to set this up. It's a very good initiative, as usual. And thank you, Farah, for your work, I must say, in these years on the youth portfolio. I think you have really introduced the argument in our assembly, really given it a good spin. And it has, besides the seminar, many other initiatives have taken foot. So thank you very much for your leadership on this. I also would like to thank our president, who has attended this event and has given her advice. I'll come back to one of the advices later on. But thank you, Madam President, also for witnessing with your presence here the importance of the youth in our assembly. I'd like to thank the guest speakers, very nice presentations, and especially also what we heard from the UN colleagues and the great example of Finland. As we are 15 days away from our biggest meeting, the annual session in Vancouver, I really hope that there will be a great participation of our youth in our assembly, that they will be engaged, participate in all the meetings, of course, present amendments, speak up in all the meetings, and as well as run for office. I'll get to that soon. Farah, of course, I support your idea of creating an informal working group on youth, peace and security in our assembly. I think this would be a great idea. When we talk about youth, as well as when we talk also about, we've had seminars on gender empowerment, I always think that those like me, like those who have a position of responsibilities, rather than, you know, in these meetings saying what is important or talk with principles, that we should talk with facts. You know, we should basically implement. I mean, in these kind of meetings, we should listen the experts, but then actually come up with facts and implement, especially for those who are in these positions. And I think here I'm very proud to say that in our staff at the Secretariat, so where we can actually do something, the Secretariat, as you see, is a very young staff. I think 10 out of 23 of the permanent staff are actually below 35. So and all were engaged recently in this period. So we have had a very, let's say, turnover of a much younger staff who has come, but the younger staff who has come also with some experience and actually providing very efficient services that you can all see. And the last point is, so this is on the Secretariat side. I think we can, don't want to tap my shoulder, but I would like to say that we've done some part from our side. But on the more political level, and this is really the comment I would like to make on President's remarks, I think I would not just limit the filter for candidature through the political groups. The President said that there are political groups who decide on the candidatures. This is very formalized in Council of Europe, in other assemblies. In our assembly, political groups don't have an official standing. Of course, they meet, they have a coordination meeting, they try to find agreements between them. But any young person who wants to run for office can simply run for office, whether it's a person presented by a party or by one of the groupings, or whether it's not. I mean, so all you need is, if you run for president or vice president, to collect 25 signatures. And if you want to run from one of the committee, just to say it 1 minute before the start of the last committee that you run for chair, deputy chair, or rapporteur. So it's very, let's say, open and possible to access the position of leadership if you have a network, if you know that you have support within your platform, let's say. So I wouldn't consider the only filter to access to leadership position whether you are being selected by the political group leaders, because they don't have a formal setting in our assembly. And also because our assembly stretches from Vancouver to Vladivostok, you know, the parties maybe reflect a little bit more what is the Brussels policy of, you know, left, right, center. But there are many countries in South Caucasus, Southeast Europe, Central Asia, and North America, I'd say, that do not really follow the Brussels, let's say, traditional political families. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much. And again, congratulations.
Thank you very much. We are approaching actually the end of our meeting, but I see our president wants to make a short remark, I guess. Margareta, please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Farah. And also I would like to say thank you for Secretary General for his remarks. It's, of course, it's true. If you want to run for a leadership position, vice president, treasurer, president, formality is to collect signatures. You can do it, step up when it's the meeting. But you know also, as parliamentarian, you are elected parliamentarians, that to have a real and true chance, you need to have also the support from somebody who stands behind you and know that you are running, are willing to support you, to gather support for you. So formally, the party groups, they are not formalized inside our CEPA, but we know that all our party groups are meeting or off all the times, on web, in person when it's our sessions. when we meet in person. And I believe strongly that if you should have a true chance, it's always better to know who are those who can have impact on your possibility to be elected. Of course, youth network is one important part, but I do also believe that the party groups is important. You can, if you start to look how many have been elected without a party group behind them, it's not so many. When it comes to the 3 committees, it's those who are members of the committee who elect. You can only step up just when the meetings is closing and saying, here I am, vote for me. It's possible, but it's more difficult without the party group. I say it because I have been in the assembly for a long time and have seen how it works when it comes to the elections. But what I would like to underline, formally, Secretary General is absolutely right. Absolutely. But if I should give you some advice, because now we have our annual session and you know about all this, so it's nothing new I'm saying to you, and this is not anything magic. It's about human beings. It's about what you already have practiced. First of all, believe in what you are doing. Believe, why are you a parliamentarian? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to contribute with? What is your contribution? But also believe in the ideas. You must believe in why should somebody vote for you? Or why are you a member of the assembly? What do you want to contribute with? And then have fun, of course. Have fun. If you like what you're doing, it's much easier. And then make yourself known. Take the floor. Make an intervention somewhere. Nobody will bite you. The worst thing that can happen is that somebody intervene on you and wants to add something, and then you can add back. So don't sit the whole annual session to be quiet. Raise your voice.
Yeah.
And get friends, as you're doing here. Have a good time. That's what I would like to add. And have a good day. And thank you, Farah. And thank you, Manu Chair. And thank you to everybody and speakers and participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margareta. Thank you, Roberto. Both of you are, I guess, right. And that's like always in political discussions. Because I think the politicians are politicians because they have ideals, because they have specific political views. So, and that connects you, of course, to your political family. And that's true for each politician. And I think we are all elected politicians, and we know that we belong to one or other political group. And then, of course, a parliamentary assembly and its rules and regulations, it is also very clear. There is a lot of space and room for individual capacities to be known, to be seen, and to be also valued. So in that sense, I think it's very important for parliamentarians to know the context in which they are operating. And I think both of you really made clear what the context of the assembly is. But we talked today actually on broader agenda of youth, peace and security, which is a very, very important topic for millions of young people around the world and in our own region, OSCE region. So in that sense, I was really, really very happy and glad that we had also a voice from Ukraine. We had our colleague from Ukraine who clearly pictured what the situation of young people is now during the war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine. So I would like really to thank all the participants, thank all the speakers. It was a rich meeting, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, it sets actually the scene for us to take the next steps and to work on this agenda. And I hope that we have been able really to establish our partnership with the organizations that participated in our meeting today, from the Office of the UN Secretary General's Envoy of Youth, which I am really very grateful, Romero, that you were here and you presented actually a very good picture of what you are doing and what the priorities are and what demands are and what the recommendations are of your office. So that was really great. We had the great intervention from United actually peace builders, young peace builders, and very clear presentation of what they are doing, but also their recommendations. You see they are political lobbyists, so immediately the 5-6 points were presented, so you can do it in this way. So I love that. And of course, Finnish example, I think that was really very well described here and a source of inspiration. So when we establish, and thank you very much, Secretary General and our President, of course, for being supportive of all these activities. And without Manucher Salahuddinov, we couldn't make all these activities. So Manucher, like always, I am so grateful for your support. This is fantastic, really. You yourself also a young leader and supporting in this great way, professional way. So thank you very much. And we will actually continue with establishing this informal working group. I am very happy with your support, the support of the leadership of the Assembly. And then we will communicate actually to the parliamentarians, to different parliamentarians, how we are going to form this working group and who could be part of that. And I think we should also take into account the recommendation that we had, that we should include also civil society, young civil society in this informal working group. So I think it was a really rich meeting. So thank you very much. And we will share all the presentations, Manucher, I guess, with the participants. I think that's good. Maybe we can include it in my report to the Assembly so that even the people who haven't participated today and missed really an opportunity to participate in this very important conversation, so they can at least have the presentations and then also the contact details of our partners. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day. Enjoy your time, and we, at least with the parliamentarians, we see each other in Vancouver in about 2 weeks. So thank you very much.